Louisa Anderson says, as a business owner, if I choose not to serve a customer whose demands contradict my convictions, am I discriminating? When is discrimination okay? Define discrimination. I wouldn't call that discrimination. I call it prejudice. Discrimination is something that every rational person does every single day of their lives. You go out to McDonald's and you decide you want to have the chicken sandwich over the Big Mac. You are discriminating. You're making a discrimination. If you buy if you are able to say that a Mercedes is a better car than a Yugo, that's discriminatory. Everything in life is discriminatory. You are making discriminations. You're making value judgments. You are separating objects according to quality. That's what discrimination is. And you're nuts if you don't discriminate. So that's one of those words that was applied to people during the Civil Rights War on racism, which was a worthy war to fight. But once again, you don't get to violate the language with words like, I'm anti-discrimination. No, you're not. Come out and say what you really are. You're anti-racism. That's a much better expression, and it's clearer. The person who's anti-discrimination then goes out and discriminates 100 times that day. I'd rather have this cable package than that cable package. I'd rather buy this brand of soap than that brand of soap. This brand of soap is probably better, but it's a little more expensive. I don't think I can afford it. I'm going to go with a cheaper brand. That's discrimination. You discriminate every day. Everybody discriminates every day. So let's go to the bigger question. That's more of a definitional question. This is going to be controversial. But again, common sense and freedom, there be your lodestones. As a business owner, if I choose not to serve a customer whose demands contradict my convictions, am I discriminating? You are. The deeper question is, should you be allowed to? And my answer is, of course you should be allowed to. You should be allowed to, if you are a business owner, if you have gone to the trouble to set up a business in the world I live in, if you want to discriminate against somebody and say, I'm not going to allow anybody in this store who's wearing a blue shirt or the color blue at all, that should be your absolute right. And if you want to take it to its logical conclusion, you should be able to say, I don't want to serve black people, I don't want to serve white people, I don't want to serve Chinese people, I don't want to serve anybody under the age of 18, I don't want to serve anybody over this. If it is a private institution, you should be allowed to do that. The answer to a person who puts out a sign that says whites only in a restaurant is not to force him. It's his business, it's his property, he can do whatever he wants. The answer to a whites only restaurant is to just let it go out of business. Because if you don't, we have laws that protect the innocent, protect the guilty to protect the innocent. We do these things to protect the outliers so that the bulk of the freedoms stay intact. As long as you're protecting the outliers, the middle's safe. And so I think it is less dangerous to say, yeah, go ahead and have your racist restaurant. That's your business. You can discriminate against people with red hair. You can you may not allow, maybe you just don't want to allow women in your store. Maybe you don't want to allow anybody like that in your store. I think you should have a right to do that. It's your store, it's private property, it's your business. You should have a right to do that. It's yours. You own it. I think you pay consequences for it, and I think in many cases you probably should pay consequences for it, because I think those policies are reprehensible. By the way, if they ever print that, they won't listen to the part where I say I think those policies are reprehensible. They'll just say I'm in favor of having restaurants that say no black people. I'm just saying, if somebody else has the ability to tell you what to do on your own private property, the sweat of your own labors and your own brow, that will never end ever. Won't end anywhere ever. The way to have desegregated the South was for people to have simply said, this is disgusting, we're not going to be a part of it anymore. And that's what was happening. Now you can make the case that the courts had to step in and speed up the process, and I think that's probably a fairly solid case. I think you can make that case. But what are you left with? Are you left with respect? I'm not sure. I think you're left with resentment and even more antagonism. I think one of the most amazing things I ever read, and one of those things that I read a long time ago before I really got into politics, was a George Will quote. And he was talking about the movie Glory. And he said the answer to prejudice is excellence. they were talking about like the Black Conservative Caucus said, you got to give us this win. You've got to allow us to win this one. And I guess he was talking with Reagan or something back when I first read this. And George Will wrote in the back of Newsweek, he said, if you give somebody something that's not a win, you don't respect people because you're forced to. You respect people because they do things that you come to grudgingly admire and make you realize that they are real people. And he was talking about the movie Glory in was it the 54th Massachusetts, I want to say, where you had an all-black regiment that was despised by Union soldiers, despised by them. Needless to say, the Confederates would have killed them to the man, and they often did. But the Union soldiers watched them go in to battle and thought these are subhuman monkeys. And then the 54th Massachusetts went in on Battery Wagner, and when the battle was over, they didn't think they were subhuman monkeys. They went in there and performed magnificently. And the people watching that had to confront who are you going to believe, your prejudices or your own lying eyes? Had to watch those men go in there and live and die like men. And when it was over, they were by and large treated differently because of the evidence of their excellence, the evidence of their courage, the evidence of their willingness to die for the same cause that white people were dying for. And that changed a lot of minds, and does change a lot of minds. So public structures, public buildings, those have the absolute right and the obligation to be utterly colorblind and non-restrictive in any way. But private property and private businesses are private businesses. And frankly, if you have a problem with me saying that a guy should be able to have a restaurant that says we don't serve blacks, if you have a real problem with that, then how do you justify Curves being able to say that we don't allow men inside? What's the difference? Really, what's the difference? Is it because one group's okay and the other group's not? If we had a male-only gym, there'd be protesters outside. How many Curves are there in the country? Hundreds? Hundreds, certainly. Maybe thousands. Nobody has a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. If women want to work out together, that makes sense to me. That's fine. But if you're able to say that, you don't get to support Curves and say, oh, it's reprehensible that we would allow somebody to be that prejudiced. We would take away a person's right to eat wherever they want to. You know? I think if there's somebody who wants to have an all-black restaurant, they can have an all-black restaurant. I think that person's really diseased, and I think they'll see some protesters outside. That's your right, too, by the way. You have a right to protest these kind of things. And, you know, I don't know. But I think the excellent argument is the argument, and all you have to do is look at Booker T. Washington, the Tuskegee Institute, and the Tuskegee Airmen and see what happened when the black community leaders decided to go down the road of, no, we're not going to ask for lower standards. We're going to have to demand higher standards because we've got something to prove. When I think about the debate between Booker T. Washington, this not just the one debate, I mean the societal debate between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington arguing for excellence, Du Bois arguing for the talented 10th, the 10% elite who would get all these things and supposedly, you know, they would be given things by the Great White Father, and then they would pass them on down to the black community. I guess that was a theory. W.E.B. Du Bois has given us Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and Booker T. Washington gave us the Tuskegee Airmen who never lost a bomber in World War II. That's just evidence, you know. That's not me wishing something was true or not true. It's just what happened.